Welcome to Session 3 of our study on the books of Joshua and Judges. Today we're going to take a quick look at some of the recent attempts to confirm that the narratives of Joshua have a historical basis. But most of this session will focus on chapters 3 through 7. Joshua and the Israelites cross over the Jordan River into the Promised Land and conquer Jericho. But first we begin with a prayer. O God, our Father, open our eyes and enlighten our minds as we study your word. So grant that our minds may know your truth and our hearts may feel your love, and then confirm and strengthen our wills that we may go out to live what we have learned. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Most contemporary scholars see little evidence that the Joshua stories of conquest have a basis in history. But in the first half of the 20th century, Alt and W.F. Albright did research on historical geography and archaeology. Alt suggested that the earliest traditions of the book of Joshua might provide insight into the history of the tribal Israel. For Albright, the text of Joshua preserved history, and he focused on archaeological evidence available at the time in ancient literature to confirm the historical reliability of the account of the conquest in the book of Joshua. They theorized that the first step in recovering historical Joshua was to remove the literary additions that created the narrative of Joshua 1 through 11. According to both scholars, the Elohistic and Deuteronomistic authors introduced the detours of Joshua outside the designated area between the Jordan River and Gibeon, in which Joshua leads the Israelite nation to more distant places, such as Shechem, Judah, and Galilee. We will see a good deal of evidence of stories on top of stories in the book of Joshua. These scholars argued that if the excess could be cleared away, the stories that remain may have historical merit. Many of the ideas that Alt and Albright advocated for may still be valid, but the archaeological evidence in the past 30 to 50 years has not supported their claims. Chapters 3 through 5 in the book of Joshua describe the crossing of the ark over the Jordan River. This is the first episode in the procession of the ark to Ebal and Gerizim. If you remember in chapter 1, Joshua said, "Prepare yourselves provisions, for in 3 days you're going to cross the Jordan." Chapter 2 tells the story of 2 spies that Joshua then sent into Jericho. After being hidden by Rahab, the spies went into hiding in the mountains for 3 days before they crossed back over the Jordan and reported back to Joshua. Chapter 3 begins with Joshua rising the next morning, and we still seem to have 3 days before the crossing of the Jordan. There's no mention of the spies. The spy story of chapter 2 appears to have been an insertion between chapter 1 and chapter 3 at a later date. All the same, 3 days seems to be code for a short period of time, not necessarily just 3 days. The crossing of the Jordan is a big deal, not just because the Israelites are crossing over into Canaan, but because the Lord is crossing over as well. So let's read chapter 3, the first 6 verses. Early in the morning, Joshua rose and set out from Shittim with all the Israelites, and they came to the Jordan. They camped there before crossing over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, "When you see the Ark of the Covenant, the Lord your God, being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place. Follow it, so that you may know the way you should go, for you have not passed this way before. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, a distance of about 2,000 cubits. Do not come any nearer to it." Then Joshua said to the people, "Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." To the priests Joshua said, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on in front of the people." So they took up the Ark of the Covenant and went in front of the people. So the Ark of the Covenant contains the stone tablets of the law. It's imagined as both a sacred and a magical object, and as such is also a divine or holy vessel carried into battle. But it's also a dangerous object, so the people are told to stay back 2,000 cubits, a little over half a mile. Let's go to verse 7. The Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that you may know that I will be with you as I was with Moses. You are the one who shall command the priests and who bear the ark of the covenant. When you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Joshua then said to the Israelites, "Draw near and hear the words of the Lord your God." Joshua said, "By this you shall know that among you is the living God, who without fail will drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, Hivitites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. The ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is going to pass before you into the Jordan. So now select 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one for each tribe. When the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all earth, come to rest in the waters of the Jordan flowing from above shall be cut off. They shall stand in a single heap." Joshua and the people are told to stand still when they come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan. In verse 13, we read about the waters of the Jordan flowing from above. The Hebrew word for Jordan is Yarden, which means comes down. It comes down from the mountain heights to the Dead Sea, the lowest point on the face of the earth. Verse 12, about selecting 12 men who then have nothing to do, was probably erroneously transposed from chapter 4, verse 2, where it seems to make more sense. In verse 14, we hear, "When the people set out from their tents to cross over the Jordan, the priests bearing the ark of the covenant were in front of the people. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. So when those who bore the ark had come to the Jordan and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the edge of the waters flowing from above stood still, rising up in a single heap, far off at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, while those flowing toward the sea of the Arabah, the Dead Sea, were wholly cut off. The people crossed over opposite Jericho, while all Israel was crossing over on the dry land. The priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan until the entire nation finished crossing over the Jordan." So this long run-on sentence from verses 14 through 16 is somewhat complicated. We know the spies must have just crossed over the Jordan and back at some ford, but the story needs an impassable Jordan to enable the miracle of immobilizing its waters. So we are reminded that the river would have to have been overflowing after winter rains. We clearly have a repetition of the drying up and crossing of the Sea of Reeds or the Red Sea in Exodus, allowing Joshua to be compared to Moses. Let's go on to chapter 4. When the entire nation had finished crossing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Select 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, and command them, take 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood, carry them over with you, and lay them down in the place where you camp tonight." Then Joshua summoned the 12 men whom he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe. Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of Israelites, so that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, 'What do these stones mean to you?' then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off in front of the ark and the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the Israelites a memorial forever." In verse 6 we have, "When your children ask in time to come, 'What do these stones mean to you?'" This is a liturgical formula in which the commemorative stones can become an instructional occasion for retelling the ancient miracle to future generations. So let's go on to verse 8. The Israelites did as Joshua commanded. They took up the 12 stones out of the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, carried them over with them to the place where they camped, and laid them down there. Joshua set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. The priests who bore the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord had commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. The people crossed over in haste. As soon as all the people had finished crossing over the ark of the Lord, and the priests crossed over to the front of the people. The Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over armed before the Israelites as Moses had ordered them. About 40,000 armed for war crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for battle. So the second set of stones looks redundant and maybe a little bit confusing. This may represent a competing account of the event, and the redactor decided to include both versions. Verse 10 refers to all that Moses had commanded Joshua, which was, in this case, nothing. That statement fits better in verse 12, where it refers to the soldiers of the 2.5 tribes who were to remain on the east side of the Jordan. So let's go on to verse 14. On that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him, as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. The Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant to come up out of the Jordan." Joshua therefore commanded the priests, "Come up out of the Jordan." When the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord came up from the middle of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. Those 12 stones that had taken out of the Jordan Joshua set up in Gilgal, saying to the Israelites, "When your children ask their parents in time to come, 'What do these stones mean?' then you shall let your children know, Israel crossed over the Jordan here on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the water of the Jordan for you until you crossed over, and as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we crossed over, so that all the people of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is as mighty, and so that you may fear the Lord your God forever." So we again hear of the commemorative stones now set in place at Gilgal. The literary function of Gilgal in the Hebrew Bible is pretty consistent. Gilgal occurs 38 times, mostly in stories critical of kingship, and this criticism is central in the book of Joshua. The identification of Gilgal as the first camp in the Promised Land encourages a symbolic interpretation of the site. Gilgal is also associated with a range of cultic rites of passage into the Promised Land. The 12 stones, circumcision, Passover, unleavened bread, and the cessation of manna. Ultimately, the camp at Gilgal provides a contrast to the royal cities in the Promised Land that Joshua and Caleb destroy. The convolutions of chapter 3 and 4 result from the concentration of a large number of themes into a narrow period of the Jordan crossing. Too many topics have been crammed into too constricted a narrative space, so that the thematic threads have tangled and knotted. The disposition of memorial stones competes with the main plot line of Yahweh stopping the Jordan, simultaneously enhancing the standing of Joshua, defining the procession order, and exploring the theological meaning of the event. This is undoubtedly the result of a complicated history of composition and redaction. But now we're going to go on to chapter 5. When all the kings of the Amorites beyond the Jordan to the west, and all the kings of the Canaanites by the sea heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan for the Israelites until they had crossed over, their hearts melted, and there was no longer any spirit in them because of the Israelites. At that time the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites a second time." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gilbreth, Haraloth. This is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the males of the people who came out of Egypt, all the warriors, had died during the journey through the wilderness after they'd come out of Egypt. Although all the people who came out had been circumcised, Yet all the people born on the journey through the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt had not been circumcised. For the Israelites traveled 40 years in the wilderness, until all the nation, the warriors who came out of Egypt, perished, not having listened to the voice of the Lord. To them the Lord swore that he would not let them see the land that he had sworn to their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So it was their children whom he raised up in their place that Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. So this story takes place in the late Bronze Age when flint knives were still in use. It is likely that it was written in the Iron Age when iron and steel were common. The author makes a point of writing flint knives instead of just knives to demonstrate that flint would have been appropriate for that time. The old generation having died out is to be replaced by this new generation of adult males who will carry out the campaign of invasion. Go on to verse 8. When the circumcision of all the nation was done, they remained in their places in the camp until they were healed. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away from you the disgrace of Egypt." And so that place is called Gilgal to this day. The shame of Egypt may have a double sense referring to slavery. Now, as free men entered into the covenant of Abraham, the Israelites are ready to conquer their own land, and also to their uncircumcised condition, which was not the case when they were in Egypt. Let's go on to verse 10. When the Israelites were camped in Gilgal, they kept the Passover in the evening on the 14th day of the month in the plains of Jericho. On the day after the Passover, on that very day, they ate the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and roasted grain. The manna ceased on the day they ate the produce of the land, and the Israelites no longer had manna. So they ate the crops of the land of Canaan that year. Of all the stipulated festival sacrifices, it was Passover that confirmed a person's full-time participation in the community of Israel. Verse 13 through the end of the chapter. Once when Joshua was by Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing before him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went to him and said, "Are you one of us or one of our adversaries?" He replied, "Neither, but as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped. And he said to him, "What do you command your servant, my lord?" The commander of the army of the Lord said to Joshua, "Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy. You may recognize this as a direct quotation of God's words to Moses at the burning bush. Both episodes are dedication stories as a leader is about to embark on a mission. In Exodus, Moses is addressed by God himself. Joshua is the legitimate heir of Moses, but a lesser figure. We go on to chapter 6. The destruction of Jericho is the second stage in the procession of the ark to Ebal and Gerizim. The procession of the ark around Jericho is intended to reveal the power of Yahweh. Only this time the revelation is of the divine warrior who miraculously destroys city walls. So verses 1 through 7. Now Jericho was shut up inside and out because of the Israelites. No one came out and no one went in. The Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have handed Jericho over to you along with its kings and soldiers. You shall march around the city, all the warriors circling the city once. Thus you shall do for 6 days, with 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, the priests blowing their trumpets. When they make a long blast with the ram's horn, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the walls of the city will fall down flat, and all the people shall charge straight ahead." So Joshua, son of Nun, summoned the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant and have 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark of the Lord." To the people he said, "Go forward and march around the city. Have armed men pass before the ark of the Lord." As Joshua had commanded, the people the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord went forward, blowing the trumpets, with the ark of the covenant of the Lord following them. And the armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, while the trumpets blew continuously. To the people Joshua gave this command: You shall not shout, nor let your voice be heard, nor shall you utter a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout. So the ark of the Lord went around the city, circling it once, and they came to the camp and spent the night in the camp. So there's a clear separation between Joshua, the priest, and the people in the instructions for waging war. Only Joshua receives the revelation of the ritual procedures for destroying Jericho. As a result, the priests require separate liturgical instruction concerning the ark and the 7 ram's horns. Joshua's initial command to move into position is given through the priests, signaling to the reader that something other than conventional military maneuver is in the offing here. We go on to verse 12. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord passed on, blowing the trumpets continually. The armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets blew continually. On the 2nd day they marched around the city once, and then returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day they rose early at dawn and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. It was only on that day that they marched around the city 7 times. And at the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall live, because she hid the messengers we sent. As for you, keep away from the things devoted to the destruction, so as not to covet and take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel an object for destruction, bringing trouble upon it. For all silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. As soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpets, they raised a great shout, and the wall fell down flat. So the people charged straight ahead into the city and captured it. Then they devoted to destruction by the edge of the sword all in the city, both men and women, young and old, oxen, sheep, and donkeys. Verse 17 says, The city and all that is in it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Other translations use the term ban or harem. This means annihilating its population and its animals, and at least in this instance, dedicating all objects of value to the Lord's treasury. Certainly the grimmest aspect of this triumphalist story. The enactment of the ban or harem is in keeping with the reiterated injunction of the Deuteronomy to exterminate the native population of Canaan. That is a utopian plan because it is highly unlikely that it was ever acted upon. For the Deuteronomist, it is a brutal way of expressing the absolute separation from pagan population, a separation that never really occurred, called for in his program of uncompromising monotheism. And the hallmark of the Deuteronomist is often detectable in Joshua. The ban was not an Israelite invention, as there is archaeological evidence that it was sometimes practiced by various Canaanite peoples. Let's go on to verse 22. But to the 2 men who had spied out the land, Joshua said, Go into the prostitute's house and bring out the woman out of it, all who belong to her, as you swore to her. So the young men who had been spies went in and brought Rahab out, along with her father, her mother, her brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought out all her kindred out, and set them outside the camp of Israel. They burned down the city and everything in it, only silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. But Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, Joshua spared. Her family has lived in Israel ever since, for she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Joshua then pronounced this oath, saying, Cursed before the Lord be anyone who tries to build this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn he shall lay its foundation. At the cost of his youngest he shall set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. The reason for Joshua's ruthless hostility toward Jericho is not entirely clear, since there is no evidence that its inhabitants committed any war crimes. But we go on to chapter 7. But the Israelites broke faith in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things, and the anger of the Lord burned against the Israelites. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, east of Bethel, and said to them, Go up and spy out the land. And the men went up and spied out Ai, and they returned to Joshua and said to him, Not all the people need go up. About 2,000 or 3,000 men should go up and attack Ai. Since they are so few, do not make the whole people go up there. So about 3,000 of the people went up there, and they fled before the men of Ai. The men of Ai killed about 36 of them, chasing them from the outside of the gates as far as Sherbim, and killing them on the slope. The hearts of the people melted and turned to water. Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the ground on his face before the ark of the Lord until the evening, and he and his elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. Joshua said, Ah, Lord God, why have you brought this people across the Jordan at all, to hand us over to the Amorites so as to destroy us? Would that we had been content to settle beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say? Now that Israel has turned their backs to their enemies, the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear of it and surround us and cut off our name from the earth. Then what will you do for your great name? Joshua's complaint is distinctly reminiscent of the complaints of the Israelites in the wilderness to Moses, asking him why he brought them into the wilderness instead of leaving them in peace in Egypt. This echo may suggest that Joshua is not quite fit to be the same leader that Moses was. Let's go to verse 10. The Lord said to Joshua, Stand up. Why have you fallen on your face? Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant that I have imposed upon them. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen, and they have acted deceitfully, and they have put them among their own belongings. Therefore the Israelites are unable to stand before their enemies. They turn their backs to their enemies because they have become a thing devoted for destruction themselves. I will be with you no more unless you destroy the devoted things from among you. Proceed to sanctify the people and say, Sanctify yourselves for tomorrow. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, There are devoted things among you, O Israel. You will be unable to stand before your enemies until you take away the devoted things from among you. In the morning, therefore, you shall come forward, tribe by tribe. The tribe that the Lord takes shall come near by clans, and the clan that the Lord takes shall come nearby. Households and household that the Lord takes shall come near, one by one. And the one who is taken as having the devoted thing shall be burned with fire, together with all that he has, for having transgressed the covenant of the Lord, and for having done an outrageous thing in Israel. The conquest began in chapter 2 with a positive example story, but now in chapter 7 is punctuated by a negative one. The stories about Achan and Ai were originally independent tales. They have been joined together into a single plot movement in which the capture of Ai serves as an ultimate narrative goal of the combined whole. The narrative arc of 7:1 finished at 7:26, but the one that begins at 7:2 is not completed until 8:29. In other words, Achan has been inserted into the Ai plot. The cautionary Achan story has become the primary obstacle to the resolution of the Ai plot line. It seems to have been substituted for a tactical miscalculation or failure to consult Yahweh as the original cause of Israel's defeat. Conversely, the Ai defeat now serves as a context for the discovery of Achan's sins. So we go on. Verse 16. So Joshua rose early in the morning and brought Israel near, tribe by tribe, and the tribe of Judah was taken. He brought near the clans of Judah, and the clan of the Zeraths was taken, and he brought near the clan of Zerathis by household, and Zabdi was taken, and he brought near his household one by one, and Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was taken. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord God of Israel and make confession to him. Tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me. And Achan answered Joshua, it is true, I am the one who sinned against the Lord God of Israel. This is what I did. When I saw among the spoil a beautiful mantle from Shinar, and 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, then I coveted them and took them. Now they lie hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there it was, hidden in his tent with the silver underneath. They took them out of the tent and brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites. They spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, son of Zerah, with the silver, the mantle, and the bar of gold, with his sons and daughters, with his oxen, donkeys, and sheep, and with his tent and all that he had. And they brought him up to the valley of Achor. Then Joshua said, why did you bring trouble on us? The Lord is bringing trouble on you today. All Israel stoned him to death, and they burned them with fire, cast stones on them, and raised over him a great heap of stones that remains to this day. And the Lord turned from his burning anger. Therefore, that place to this day is called the Valley of Achor. The Valley of Achor means Valley of Trouble, making the end of this story a tale about the origin of a place name. It may have been originally called the Valley of Trouble for entirely different reasons. For example, because its terrain was treacherous or bleak or barren. In our next session, we'll read and discuss chapters 8 through 12, the final chapters of the invasion of Canaan. We'll also discuss some more about Joshua and the Deuteronomists. Hope you can join us for our discussion session Monday evening. Send an email to online.classes@northgateumc.org to get the Zoom link. Have a good week.